welcome to the premiere of our 6th season here at Arts in the City. So happy to be back with you. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. Times Square, there is no place else quite like it, but this noisy neon crossroads of the world is very different today than it was back in the 1970s. The acclaimed HBO series The Deuce recreates those seedy days, and our Neil Rosen got a behind-the-scenes look at how and where it's done. Here's Talking Movies.
Seedy, grimy, treacherous 1970s Times Square has been remarkably recreated in Washington Heights for the acclaimed HBO series The Deuce, which has just started its 2nd season. The series looks at prostitution and the birth of the adult film industry in the Times Square area. Looking at old photographs, film, and videotape, the production designer and his crew meticulously recreated the way Times Square looked in 1978, including where I'm standing now, which is supposed to be 8th Avenue, in reality, Amsterdam and 164th Street. Over the course of 6 hectic hours, utilizing old cars, period trash, vintage signage and posters, as well as hundreds of extras wearing authentic wigs, makeup, and costumes from the era, the production team turns back the hands of time and literally transforms a nice present-day neighborhood in Washington Heights into the grimy Times Square of 40 years ago.
Having grown up in New York and having seen Times Square in the 70s, I knew that there was no place that existed that looked like that anymore.
Nina Noble is one of the show's executive producers.
So that really was my first challenge, and the first thing we did really was to hire a location manager and just task them with this one thing, which, I don't care what else is in the script, go and find, where we can make Times Square. Obviously, we were looking for the architecture, someplace that can match the architecture, at least on the ground floor, because knowing that these days you use a lot of CGI and you have a lot of other ways to create Times Square, but it was important to us that we had a place that we could create a place where the actors could work.
What's your name, girl? Lori.
So the first season was 1971, 72. We were focused mostly on prostitution. There were a lot of girls on the streets, and that was the main industry, and it was just the beginning of the porn industry in New York. There were loops and things like that, but it was very primitive. And now in the 2nd season, we get to the late 70s where there's less girls on the streets, there's more trash, there's more violence, there's more corruption, male hustlers, which we didn't see too much of in season 1.
Scott Dugan is the production designer for HBO's The Deuce.
Behind me is our Showland Theater, which sort of stands in for various sex theaters and porn peep emporiums that were in the neighborhood on 8th Avenue in 1978. They sort of really emerged in the mid-70s, and by 1978 sort of have taken over the block. So I think to my right there's Showland Theater, and to my left there's an adult bookshop, and in between there's a barber shop, which is kind of the world of 8th Avenue in 1978. Once the crew gets here and we start filming, we change the direction of traffic. So this is Amsterdam Avenue is a two-way street up here on 165th Street. We basically bring in a bunch of period cars and we play it, all of the traffic is going north as if you were on 8th Avenue and 45th Street in New York City.
Tell me about these storefront signs, not just the Showland one over there behind you, but adult bookshop, cameras, electronics, souvlaki sandwiches, the donut shop. Are a lot of these exact replicas from your research, or did you take some license and say, well, this would kind of maybe look like this would fit the period, or what did you do?
There's some license in some of them. I mean, Showland is, like I said, sort of an amalgamation of a few different sex shops. Other ones are, direct replicas. There's a big Playland sign here, which was on 8th Avenue, and we saw in the first season, and just the sort of the layout of the light bulb was basically a flashing light bulb sign. And that's a sort of replica of that actual place, and we match the storefront as much as we can.
Over your left shoulder, there's some barn grill thing over there.
Yeah.
Was there a barn grill like that? I think there probably was.
That typeface is taken from the Terminal Bar. The Terminal Bar and Grill which was on 41st and 8th Avenue, I think, the Terminal Bar and Grill was. So we always love that sign.
Where do you find all this old, garbage? Where do you find old, do you make it?
Mostly, yes.
You make old garbage.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think we bought like 4 or 5 pallets of old newspapers from Schenectady or something like that on season 1. And then we have a big warehouse of sort of junk furniture that once it goes out of use or we've used it in a bunch of sets, we just bash it up and turn it into trash. The biggest thing is actually making sure that things that didn't exist aren't in the trash.
Painting with trash, we like to call it here.
Vintage posters and ads from the era are painstakingly recreated and then dirtied up with spray paint and graffiti for authenticity. Speak to me about the vintage hairstyles, the makeup,
costumes.
and the wardrobes.
So Ana Teresas, who's our costume designer, you know, the style changes a lot between 72 and 78. This year you start to get into full sort of like Saturday Night Fever looks. You get touches of hip hop. So I think when you see the people get out on the street, you'll see these like amazing hairstyles and, you know, pants and leggings and shirts and, you know, all sorts of different colors sort of emerge onto this landscape, which at the moment is like pretty down. And the color really comes from like the sex shops and like the crazy styles.
On 165th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, in what's made to look like 42nd Street and 8th Avenue in 1978, for Arts in the City, I'm Neil Rosen.
For more of Times Square 1970s style, check out The Deuce. Season 2 is airing now on HBO. Do you love live performance, but not the crowded show venues? If so, listen up. Ari Goldberg introduces us to a Brooklyn concert series you can enjoy from the comfort of a neighbor's living room.
You can see a concert in any venue, and maybe not just a theater, maybe a living room. Brooklyn-based curator Mara Meyer explains.
Home Audio series is a monthly salon series, so it's a performance series that happens in people's homes in Brooklyn. And it includes experimental music, visual art, sometimes performance art, sometimes dance, and always snacks.
Mara has been organizing this unique concert series since 2011, inviting not only the artists, but arranging the venue as well.
So I usually visit the venue or the person's home maybe like a month before and just kind of check it out. Some will be more of a like traditional style of apartment, and some will be more loft spaces that have been converted from other industrial uses. So they might look more open and you know, different from like your typical home, what you would expect. I try to curate the vibe of what's happening. I try to really encourage people to feel like they're just at a house party, hanging out, talking to each other. So there's no separation of like, oh, this is this famous performer, they're up on a stage, I'm never gonna be able to speak to them. And we've literally had people who have performed all over the world, like Carnegie Hall, all these really fancy venues, and then they come in and perform at a home audio show alongside somebody else who I met in the subway as a performer. And there's no distinction between them. There's no hierarchy in any way. So that's what's really special about it, I think.
At Home Audio, performers find themselves in more intimate settings than they might be used to. Audience sizes are small, ranging from 10 to, at most, 50.
For some people at first, it's more intimidating because they don't have the bright lights in their eyes, so their vision is blacked out and they can pretend like there's no one there, which you can actually do on a big stage. It ends up just being more real and more authentic. Most performers, after their experience at Home Audio, give me really positive feedback. A lot of times I hear that performing on my series was crucial to the development of their work, and that they've performed in one of my house shows and then they've taken their work and done something else with it afterwards, developed it further, made it into a bigger performance, because they get a lot of really good audience feedback from doing these shows as well.
And as far as locations go, Home Audio shows happen all around Brooklyn, with plans to produce them around the country in the near future.
Sometimes friends volunteer to host in their spaces. That's how it originally started. And then what's really happened has been organic from there. People come as audience members to the shows and they say, this is so cool, I want to do this in my house. So then I say, okay, when do you want to do it? It's a huge help that the hosts are willing to donate their space for the evening, because all that money we would normally spend on renting a venue is able to go to paying the artists. In the last year, I think people have been really craving more of a personal connection and more of cultural immersion and just like real experience in their life. I've noticed that this kind of scene, this trend of doing house shows or other shows in different non-traditional venues, intimate spaces, has really been kind of just blowing up. It's not a new idea to most artists to do a performance like this. It's kind of becoming more common. It's not that weird to say, hey, want to come over and perform in the living room.
To apply to be an artist or a host, visit homeaudioseries.com. Coming to Brooklyn to a venue or living room near you. I'm Ari Goldberg for Arts in the City.
If you're a woman looking to take your career to the next level, we've got you covered. In this month's Book It, we sit down with Kate White, former editor-in-chief at Cosmo and author of the Gutsy Girl Handbook. Kate, thank you so much for having us here today.
It's great to have you.
So your book is called The Gutsy Girl Handbook, and it's loaded with great advice. But tell us in sort of a sentence what a gutsy girl is.
In a nutshell, I feel a gutsy girl is just a woman who goes for it. She isn't afraid to throw out a great idea in a meeting. She isn't afraid to ask for the money she wants or to raise her hand for an opportunity, or even like to take a seat at a meeting that's empty where somebody else might think, oh, I don't know who's going to be sitting there, so I don't dare sit there.
You make a comparison between the gutsy girl and the good girl. Tell me about that.
I think a good girl is just the opposite. It's someone who is waiting for someone to tell her to ask for a raise or to do something, to submit an idea. She just holds back, and that's a detriment. I think when we're good girls, we tell ourselves, look, I don't want to rock the boat. I want to be appropriate here. If they wanted me to do that, they would tell me. But that's just not the case.
I think I'm probably rarely accused of being a good girl, but you know, in moments I can see some of those tendencies. Do you think that most women struggle with that to some degree?
Yes, it's hard to find the line because you want to be diplomatic. You don't want to be seen as a bitch or too assertive. And I think we often err on the side of being good girls when we should try to go for it. For me, gutsy always wins the day. I loved running Cosmopolitan magazine, but one of the things I liked most about it is it was a magazine that had to be over the top. So it really forced you to look at everything and say, is this as out there as it should be? And that's important to do with ideas, anything you're working on, an event you're doing. And I found this little technique for myself that I call the 4 Bs, where I would just ask myself, could it be better? Could it be bigger? Could it be bolder? Could it even be more badass? Because so often the breakthrough ideas break the rules.
All of us, of course, want success, but I took away from your book that you also are a big believer in the power of failure. And I was really struck by this anecdote you told about how you analyzed the magazine covers.
I call that the rug test. I think it's important to look failure in the face, not ruminate or beat yourself to death about it, but see what it can teach you. And what I did at Cosmo when we would have a dud cover, and fortunately my successes there way outnumbered the duds, but I would put that dud on the rug, and above it I would put some of the really winning covers, and below it some of the losers. And invariably, with a distance of a few months, I would see something I hadn't when we were going to press.
I was particularly interested about your story in the book when you left Cosmo and ultimately got to what you're doing now, but that had to take some real nerve.
Well, leaving the Cosmo beauty closet is a really daring thing to do because it was beyond fantastic. I thought it through a lot. I gave a couple of years notice that was a secret, and I really got my ducks in a row in order to do it. And so on the one hand, it was gutsy because whenever we change careers, it is gutsy. But I did the prep work. And you don't want to over-prepare. Sometimes it's really better to start before you're ready. But when it involves finances, it's important to really bring some forethought into it. And I knew I could afford to do it at that point. I also knew that I really wanted to try writing murder mysteries at some point. And so I did it. I wrote 8 while I was still there, and then I built the foundation to leave.
Tell me about your writing style. Do you have any habits that you always follow, or any sort of like quirky things that you do to get started?
I love to write, but it is a little bit hard for me. So I do some rituals. In fact, I often tell writers, figure out your writer's cocktail. I discovered after years of trying to write with a roll-top desk that I really needed a flat surface.
Interesting.
And I found that I write better in the morning. I cannot produce a sentence after dinner. I have a home office here, which has been great, and I can set it up the way I want. But I still have to force myself in the chair with a lot of rituals and knowing I got to be there at a certain time and treat it like a real job.
Kate, thank you so much for having us here today. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're so welcome, Carol Anne. Great to have you.
From the page to the stage, if you've ever wondered what it takes to write a play, our next story has some answers. Beth Kovetz takes us inside the creative process.
For an audience, a play is a lovely evening at the theater. But did you know that it can take years and years of rewrites and workshops and readings for a playwright to create a single theatrical work of art? So where does a writer start?
Where does it start?
Arlene Hutton is the author of more than a dozen full-length works, among them the Nibrock Trilogy and Letters to Sala. So, Arlene should know.
It's a spark. And I think most playwrights are of one camp or another. They either start from story, they plot out their play, or they start with character.
So you have a great idea, and you've got some characters and some dialogue. Maybe your new play is ready to be workshopped.
A play doesn't go from page to stage. The important thing, I think, is that we have to hear a play. One of the things I like best about writing for the theater is that it's a collaborative art. So once you've written your play, that's not the end of it. You then get to see what actors and directors and designers bring to it, and then to hear it in front of an audience. And that's when your play really lives. A script is just a script.
Once your play is written, getting it workshopped is no small chore, even for an established writer. A lot of playwriting classes are restricted, but some places have an open-door policy.
I think places like the Barrow Group really serve playwrights well. We have an acting community here, so we're able to bring actors into the workshops. We're able to provide readings for the playwrights so that they can hear their work. There's a number of places in town that do similar things. Playwriting is hard, and I'm delighted to see the people that come into my workshops. They're age 17 to 83, sometimes in the same class. I have people who are actors and directors, but also people who come from a journalist background, fiction writing, or even a retired city planner who wants to write a play. Elementary school teachers, there's all kinds of people that decide they want to write a play.
So why do people enroll in a playwriting
I
class?
started writing because there's no roles for like a curvy 30-something-year-old who don't speak with an accent. Really bad accent, okay? You know, and I'm like, I can't do this, you know, and I just started having to write my own material.
No, it'll be a cold day in hell before I'm a playwright. So why do I do it? I served a lot of time in uniform, retired. And if you Google playwrights, actors who served in combat, you see a lot of us do it just to figure out what the hell happened to us. And ultimately, we try to come home again. So that's for the vets out there.
For me, that's the greatest value of being in a class like this, is to be able to get all of my mistakes out in a safe and supportive atmosphere with colleagues who are striving for the same thing, who have their own unique voices and can share their lessons, their tips, their processes to help me move past that badness, hopefully, at some point.
From the Barrow Group on 36th Street, this has been Lisa Beth Kovetz for Arts in the City.
Actor John Amos, famous for his roles in the miniseries Roots and the comedy show Good Times, has started a new chapter, children's books. Andrew Falzon has that story.
Yeah, at one point I was a social worker in the Brooklyn House of Detention and worked in the Tombs in Manhattan.
That career wouldn't last long for John Amos, but his desire to help people may explain why the Emmy-nominated actor has expanded his creative repertoire to include authoring books for children.
A World Without Color introduces children to a city called Bleekersville, in which everything is bleak, gray, mundane, you know, all one color. And as the children read the book and they encounter different characters in the book, these characters bring different emotions, and each emotion that they bring into the book, whether it's joy or extreme happiness or good luck that they receive some wonderful news through the mail, changes their attitude and thereby changes the color of the world as they see it.
But at a school in New Jersey, the book has become more than just words and pictures and pages. It's become a teaching tool that's helping students overcome disability by using emotion to teach the concept of color.
It was the first experience that I've had where we didn't try to convey the concept of color through temperature or volume. I mean, this was a really beautiful approach to thinking about empathy and how that makes you feel, and then having that explain what, as best we can, color must be like.
David Feinholz is the executive director of St. Joseph's School for the Blind in Jersey City. The school has been helping children with visual disabilities since 1891, going back more than 125 years.
All of our kids have some level of vision loss or total vision loss, but they all also have at least a mild or moderate learning disability. Some are on the autism spectrum, and still others are severely physically and cognitively delayed.
Where was John Amos born?
Amos didn't intend to write the book for children with special needs.
John Amos was born in Newark, New Jersey,
but says he's thrilled it's helping them. He's best known for his roles in the Eddie Murphy comedy Coming to America, the TV comedy Good Times.
Cause this discussion ain't for no little boys.
I ain't no little boy, Daddy. I'm 12 years old.
You wanna make 13?
And the groundbreaking miniseries Roots. This was Amos' second visit to the school, and this time he wanted to better immerse himself in the world of his readers, who showed him the basics of Braille. The school's faculty transcribed the book into the tactile language, and some of the students read John's book back to him.
What's wrong? His father asked. Everything in Bleekersville is just so dull, sighed Casey.
Amos shared his book with the students, who in turn told Amos how grateful they were that he came back to their school for a second time.
Yeah. Yes, you can have a hug.
What does that mean? What is
Thank you.
What is
Thank
that
you. To have children experience color without actually seeing color is a challenge, but through their emotional connection, we are able to establish a relationship with the children. It allows them to feel color.
A World Without Color is available at bookstores nationwide and available online as well. To learn more about St. Joseph's, you can visit them at their website, which is schoolfortheblind.org. I'm Andrew Falzon for Arts in the City.
That is our show for today. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, you can find us online whenever you need your New York City arts and culture fix. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. We'll see you next time on Arts in the City.